Discussing all tonight's topics, my brilliant panel joining me tonight are comedian Dan Spencer, the People's Gammon Paul Cox, and the lawyer and polymath Andrew Eborn. But first, let's get your latest news headlines from Tatiana Sanchez.
Leo, thank you very much and good evening. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The UK has reaffirmed its commitment to Ukraine as the country's war with Russia enters its third year. £245 million has been promised to boost critical stockpiles of ammunition. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he's proud that since the invasion, the UK has trained 60,000 Ukrainian troops, adding that no one has done as much for Kyiv than the UK. Well, former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been in Kyiv. He's been speaking exclusively to GB News, praising the war-torn country.
They've taken out thousands and thousands of Russian tanks, 40% of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and yet Ukraine's exports are now back up to pre-war levels. So I've got absolutely no doubt that with the right support from the West, Ukraine can win. And it's vital in the months ahead that we give them that support. This is an unconventional report, but here we are in Kyiv on the sad second anniversary with a Ukrainian population that, in my view, is absolutely determined still to win, and they're going to win.
Meanwhile, the King and Queen have praised Ukrainians for their true valour. King Charles also says he's greatly encouraged by the efforts of the UK and its allies in supporting Kyiv at a time of suffering and need. The monarch was paying his respects at a Ukrainian cathedral in central London, where crowds later gathered to show their support for the country and its people. Commemorations began with an interfaith prayer, and similar services have been held across the UK. Lee Anderson has been suspended from the Tory party. It comes after the former deputy chair said the London mayor had given the capital away and was controlled by Islamists. The Prime Minister was under pressure to react after Sadiq Khan said his deafening silence was condoning racism, while the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer's now weighed in, saying Rishi Sunak's weakness means that Tory MPs can act with impunity. A spokesperson for the party's chief whip says the MP was suspended for refusing to apologise for his comments. In a statement, Anderson said, "I fully accept they had no option but to suspend the whip in these circumstances. However, I'll continue to support the government's efforts to call out extremism in all its forms, be that anti-Semitism or Islamophobia." In other news, the body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been handed over to his mother. He unexpectedly died in prison 9 days ago. His death certificate suggested it was of natural causes. His spokeswoman says it's still not clear whether authorities will allow relatives to hold a funeral the way his family wants and the way he deserves. And junior doctors in England have walked out for the 10th time since March last year over a pay dispute. The British Medical Association has asked for a 35% pay rise. The government says that's unreasonable. More than 1.3 million appointments and operations have already been cancelled or rescheduled since industrial action began. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Leo.
Thank you, Tatiana, and welcome to the Saturday Night Showdown. Now, Google have had to put their AI image-generating tool Gemini on ice after it erased white people harder than a Netflix remake of an 80s TV show. Requests for pretty much anything returned historically inaccurate images of diverse people, such as Vikings, gingers, medieval knights, medieval kings, the founding fathers, the Pope, and even the Nazi Party. And hilariously, asking Google AI to be more historically accurate made them less historically accurate. The only way to get it to generate white people is by putting evil in front of whatever you're asking for. Then Gemini magically finds the white evil witch or white evil wizard. It's like how white men can suddenly appear in adverts if they're for domestic violence or gambling addiction. The Gemini project lead, Jack Kroczyk, I think that's how you pronounce it, said that Gemini was designed to reflect our global user base, and we take representation and bias seriously. So, Jack, you want to help your global user base by lying to them? Some guy in Bangladesh is going to fail his history exams because he's been told the Vikings were sub-Saharan Africans and the Nazis were a racially inclusive organisation led by an Indian man? I wonder if Jack has a political bias. Well, in 2020, he tweeted, "I've been crying in intermittent bursts for the past 24 hours since casting my ballot. Filling in that Biden-Harris line felt cathartic." Man, no wonder fertility rates are dropping in the West with men saying things like that. Jack is also an openly anti-white racist, as you can see by the tweets that were visible until he locked down his account. He wrote, "This is America, where racism is the #1 value our populace seeks to uphold above all." It's not just Jack. Google's entire business is guided by anti-racism, which is a word woke people use to mean lots of racism. Their training talks of white privilege, racial equity, and systemic racism. Staff are taught to identify their privileged identities using the wheel of privilege and something that's literally called the Oppression Olympics. I thought the Oppression Olympics was just a name for any recruitment process in 2024. Why is Google AI doing this? Probing Gemini for its reasons reveals how diversity and inclusion is baked into the system. Here's someone asking why Gemini made the request for an image of leprechauns black. Gemini said, "Your initial input was, please draw a portrait of leprechauns. This is what you see and is the starting point of the interaction. To expand the range of images, I internally adjust the prompt in a few ways. Keywords, I might add words such as diverse, inclusive, or specify ethnicities such as South Asian, black, etc., and genders such as female and non-binary, alongside the word leprechaun." Now, I'm not really sure why it's diverse and inclusive to only show black people, but I'm not a highly paid Google exec. It's not just Google's AI that does it. The Google search engine does this too. If you search for images of black couples, you get black couples. If you search for white couples, you get black couples. If you search for gay couples, you get gay couples. If you search for straight couples, you get gay couples who are black. If you search for white straight couples, an Eritrean drag queen comes round to your house and slaps you in the face with their snossage. But why should we care that AI is misrepresenting history? Well, it's untrue, which is wrong in and of itself. It puts ideology ahead of fact. If ideology is more important than truth, then it's right that Galileo was persecuted by the authorities for saying the Earth goes round the sun instead of the sun goes round the Earth. Yes, Galileo might have been factually correct, but the ideology that the Earth is at the centre of the universe is for the greater good, just like Google's mantras. In George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984, the main character, Winston Smith, works in the Ministry of Truth, rewriting historical documents such as newspaper articles and photographs so that they match the current party line. The mantra is, whoever controls the past controls the present. Just like the party in 1984, I got the year wrong, Google and every other organisation that signed up to diversity, equity and inclusion, they're doing this to influence people's worldview, to say that the West has always been incredibly diverse. And it's transparently obvious that their motives aren't as virtuous as they claim. Diversity, equity and inclusion is set up and funded by corporations for the purpose of convincing us that diversity is an incredible strength, not because it's a nice thing, but because it'll make the population more amenable to mass immigration. Corporations are desperate for mass immigration because it means an unlimited supply of cheap labour, an increase in asset prices and more consumers for their products. This bias doesn't stop at Gemini's racist image generation. That's just a visible and funny example of the bias in mainstream media and tech. Big tech and media also suppress facts in pursuit of the greater good, such as the Hunter Biden laptop story, which could have swung the election, but was deliberately mislabeled as a far-right conspiracy theory and buried by organisations the public trust. And lo and behold, Joe Biden was elected. And what else will Google do that's less visible than their image generation. Will they hide white businesses from search results, deny white people services, rewrite historical news articles to present what the party believes today? How can we look at China and say that their internet is censored because people aren't shown what happened at Tiananmen Square when we aren't shown an entire race? 1984 was supposed to be a warning, not an instruction manual. Anyway, I'm joined tonight by the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn.
Hello.
Plus two brilliant comedians, Diane Spencer and the People's Gammon, Paul Cox.
Hello, my little ratters.
Hey, Diane, I've got to start with you because I couldn't help but notice that Google AI eliminated redheads. You must be furious.
I'm really upset, Leo. I mean, I'm a white lady. What if I wear a white cardigan? Does that mean I literally don't exist to Google at all? Am I just invisible now?
I mean, this sounds like you'd get arrested for white supremacy if you wore the clothing while you're being white.
I have actually got a white cardigan. Maybe I should burn it just to be safe in case the police come round.
Do not burn white cardigans in your front garden.
I was like, because I saw those pictures of ginger people, and I'm like, of course there are some ginger people because ginger is, it's a, a mutation on the melanocortin 1 receptor, so it can happen sort of anywhere.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say that, but you said it's so much better. I thought it's wonderful.
That sounded like gingerphobia.
I think it was totally gingerphobia. What I love about it is they totally rewrote history, as you say.
Yeah.
So the founding fathers, they were also people of diverse colours. So you had George White Washington, like that sort of stuff. What was it? Thomas Jefferson you could have, couldn't you? And Benjamin, frankly, don't give a damn. What I love about it is this sort of thing. Well, you need to look at the reason this has happened. The reason this has happened is ChatGPT used to come up with prejudices the other way.
Right.
So it used to turn around and say, look, everything was white-orientated. What they did, Google, it used to be called Bard. They changed the name to Gemini, because it's two fingers to everybody. They changed it basically to say every time somebody does a search, you need to make sure the results are inclusive.
Right.
And that's why it's gone completely the other way. They've taken it off the market, yes.
Bias. They're trying to fix people's bias. And this is what Jack, the project lead, admits.
What's his surname?
They assume Krokzik or something.
It's a great Scrabble score. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's my Wi-Fi password. But he says, everybody is racist, so we need to combat this racism by serving up our own bias to try and tilt the bias in the other direction. I mean, this seems bad faith, Paul, to assume that all the users of Google are just evil racists and they need to be taught a lesson and shown that actually, you know what, the leader of the Nazi party was an Indian man. That's an image we didn't show because swastikas and stuff.
Wow.
I mean, I think it's delicious. This whole thing is full of serendipity. Talking of delicious, what is a snosage, by the way? I don't know what is a sausage.
No, don't ask.
Because I think my PE teacher tried to show me his once in detention.
That's an ongoing court case.
Yeah, it is, exactly. But I mean, isn't it just delicious that multiculturalism was absolutely fine until AI started to depict Nazis as black men and Vikings as black women? It's like you can't have your cake and eat it. What is it? Are we either going to tell the truth or are we going to live this fantastically ridiculous lie? I think the whole thing's disingenuous.
AI already produces some very strange images because, weren't a lot of the images that were being made of women sort of very over-sexualised?
Yeah, they're great.
No, they were a tad unrealistic, though, Leo. They were sort of big boobs, tiny waist. You would fall over.
When you can have a fantasy, is what I've always said. But you're absolutely right. They were unrealistic and unrepresentative of the real world.
Well, what happened was this, is that when they first started with AI, and I talk around the world on this stuff, Back to the Futurists, that's what I do, me, myself, and AI. What happens is this, when you first chat things into ChatGPT, if it didn't know the answer, it would make it up. Right. So this is true. It's what were called hallucinations. So there was a lawyer who famously had a big case where he was suing an airline. Right. And he went and used ChatGPT, and they suggested 3 cases, and he stood in front of the judge and said, quoted these 3 cases.
As precedent.
As precedent. And the judge looked at him and said, Mr. I won't mention his name because he'll get sued. They're all made up. And the guy was almost disbarred as a result of it. So they used to have these things called hallucinations. AI is the best co-pilot to produce an initial draft. Right. They've taken it off the market to basically tweak it a little bit more, so it'd be a brilliant thing for the future. But I'd like to put the AI into Britain, so I think we'll work on that sort of principle.
Yeah, but I'm worried that these tech companies and execs at these tech companies that have, obvious bias themselves, like Jack himself espoused these anti-white, quite savagely racist opinions, they are basically deciding what people's opinions are going to be.
It's a big danger because you're worried about the notion of shadow banning. You are worried about the notion. It was very interesting when you said about white-owned businesses.
Yes.
Because there was obviously that big argument where they kept saying, this is a black-owned business. And it's like, well, great, but if you're going to call out that it's a black-owned business, you should call out this is an Indian-owned business, a white-owned business. You should make it playable, and you're right, because at the end of the day, it is controlled by people, and it's whatever crazy ideas these people have, like you with your big boobs and your tiny waist. Like, you're going to end up with a bunch of...
Is that what Leo's got? I am now interested.
I'm wearing a reverse corset to actually even it out, Paul, and appear in this form.
But it's like all of these databases. What it is, and you work on that, but rubbish in, rubbish out. So what they've worked out is like a lot of these search things, there's a lot of prejudice when people are doing the programming, and that's what they're trying to do. So this is highlighting another side of it.
I don't think there is prejudice. I mean, there might be prejudice in the things that it scans and the things that a search engine or AI generator scans, but I don't think there's prejudice in the people just making a request to see.
There's basically the inadvertent prejudice, and this is what they're trying to do. So they're trying to balance it out. So it's a brilliant first draft.
So they're trying to balance out unconscious bias with their own very conscious bias.
Exactly.
That sounds like a dangerous... That's like turning up to a fire and trying to put it out by adding bits of fire.
Throw it out with
some petrol on it.
Yeah.
Well, moving on to more serious matters, although I don't know what could be more serious than our history being rewritten. Boris Johnson has been in Ukraine pledging his support as the war with Russia reaches its 2-year anniversary. Let's take a look at what he said.
In spite of everything, those gallant, heroic Ukrainians are fighting on, and I've got absolutely no doubt that they are going to win. And I think that with the support of the West, provided we do the right thing, give them the right support, militarily, politically, and economically, the courage of Ukrainians, their natural determination to fight for their homeland will prevail.
Andrew, strong words from Boris.
Oh, he's great. Some TV channel should sign him up. I think he's glorious. What I was interested in, though, he's with Vadim Pristaiko. Do you know who he is? He was the former... Another Scrabble score. He was the former UK ambassador for Ukraine over here. He got sacked by Zelensky. And the reason he got sacked by Zelensky, do you remember when good old Ben Wallace was turning around and saying that Zelensky should be grateful for all the stuff, and Zelensky was a bit sarcastic in response. So he got sacked as a result of it. It's interesting he's standing there. But good luck for Boris. I think the claim that we're going to win is interesting.
Well, this is the thing, Andrew, because, I mean, the West at the moment seems to be wavering in its support for Ukraine. And this is something that I think a lot of people always feared, because Putin, obviously, isn't going to waver in his own support for what he's doing. He's an autocratic leader. The war absolutely suits him because it enables him to repress people at home. So the West, you can see people now starting to question. Weirdly, it's people on the right who you'd think would be supporting their brothers in Ukraine. People on the right are saying, oh, we shouldn't be spending this money. This war is unnecessary. Putin is a bastion of Christendom, which is absolute nonsense. Putin is fighting back against wokeism, which is absolute nonsense as well. If anything, Ukraine is a traditional European Christian country that's been invaded by this megalomaniac. There's no freedom of speech in Russia. There's they've got a huge, rapidly Islamifying society. It's everything that people on the supposed right, shouldn't want.
Well, I think a big issue here is, I mean, number one, what is Boris Johnson's job title now? I'm not totally sure what his job title is.
I think he's got about 10 jobs. He's got a lot of kids to feed.
Well, it's quite interesting that he's the one that's gone on this particular anniversary. Yes. So I wonder whether he sort of checked whether Rishi was going, and then when he found out that Rishi wasn't going, he was like, well, I think I will go. Because...
He's always put himself front and centre when it comes to Ukraine, for some reason.
Yeah.
But I think what would have been more interesting is if we could have had somebody who would never do this, but Trump going. Because right now, over the last 2 years, Russia has shown that it has now come to rely on other countries that have had sanctions put on them, like Iran and North Korea.
Armenia as well, and Turkey. The exports of these, you know, the microchips and all the things that Russia needs for its military machine. Obviously, they're not being sent straight to Russia anymore.
Yeah.
But the exports to Kyrgyzstan and Armenia have shot up. So we're obviously, you know, European countries are just diverting things around.
And also you're going to find that as a result of the appalling thing about Navalny and stuff like that, what's going to happen is the support for Ukraine is galvanised.
Right.
And I think that as a result of that sort of stuff, people are turning around. You mentioned Trump. I think Putin is far scarier of Trump than he is of Biden. And it'd be very interesting to see. It is true.
Who isn't, though?
Yeah.
Who is scared of Biden? Biden is scared of Biden when he sees himself in the mirror every morning.
I'll tell you who's scared of Biden. The Democrat Party are scared of Biden. They're like, man, it's like Weekend at Bernie's for them. They're like, we've got to get this guy over the finishing line somehow. How are we going to do it?
You should be scared of Biden's dog, though, because his dog's been attacking all the time. You see all of that? Horrendous.
9 times in 24 months.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that's
It's gonna be
insane,
good.
considering the American cops shoot most dogs when the dogs haven't bitten anybody. Anyway, coming up, we will assess the week's winners and losers in Cursed or Blessed. This week, the Guardian sports writer who wants to abolish women from sports, the police force spooked by falling acorns, and has Javier Milei saved the Argentinian economy? Afuera! And we'll show you what happened when this prisoner was taken for a shower.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seemed to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in the Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals, and you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight in My Big Opinion, we're living in an age of intolerance and mob rule. At this point, our very democracy is on the line. In My Take a 10, Prince William has made a huge mistake by commenting on the war in Gaza. He should stick to opening hospitals and kissing babies. Plus, Channel 4 star Kim Woodburn on the legalisation of abortion. And the top author who's written biographies of Ken Dodd and Larry Grayson. We're live at 9.
More about that.
Hello and welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Cursed or Blessed is coming up, but first, I promised I would show you what happened when a prison guard took an inmate for a walk to the showers. So that was somebody trying to frame a prison guard for brutality, but unfortunately there were lots of cameras around, so he didn't get away with that.
It was an early bath, wasn't it? I mean, that was what a nightmare!
That was insane.
Yeah, there's got to be better ways of framing people. Is he alive?
Yeah, he is alive.
So he took a dive. Was that the idea? He took a dive and was going to blame the prison officer as a result.
Yeah,
the cameras picked up the incident, and that's what happened.
Yeah,
there's also loads of witnesses.
And they're also like, yeah, lots of people around. Unless he was just going to do a runner. Absolutely fine.
Extraordinary.
Probably. Anyway, it's time now for Cursed or Blessed. Me and my brilliant panel will look at 3 big stories and decide who are the week's winners and who are the losers. And we start with Guardian sports journalist Jonathan Liu, who has taken the unusual position for a sports journalist of wanting to abolish women from sport. Plenty of people, notably J.K. Rowling, have highlighted the impact of transgender athletes starting to dominate girls' and women's events. But Jonathan, as a woke left-wing Guardian writer, thinks that this is a great idea. He says, let's say transgender athletes pour into women's sport and let's say they dominate everything they touch. Why would that be bad? Really? Imagine a trans child or teenager seeing a trans athlete on the top step of the Olympic podium. It would be inspiring. So that's what he says. He says it wouldn't be bad if trans athletes dominated women's sports because it would be inspiring to trans kids. What about little girls?
What about the other kids?
Yeah.
Like Jonathan Luther. There we go. Is he a winner? Is he a loser? He's a loser. Because, I'm sorry, but if trans people make up how much of the population? 0.1%?
Yeah.
So what about the 50% that are women?
Yeah.
And like, I'm sorry, but it's bad enough when you're trying to do sport and you're a girl.
Yeah.
I know because
What's
I've
interesting
tried.
is that trans men, people who used to be women and turn into trans, you don't hear of them winning any of the sports. So all this bit about, you look at the reasons that sports were divided into original sex or cis sex or whatever it is, was simply because
male and female. I think you just say male and female.
Exactly. It's to do with strength. So the whole idea of competing, work on that basis. Maybe we should have some, and J.K. Rowling as in bowling. So you work on that sort of principle, that if it's to be fair in sport, maybe they should have their own sports if they want to do that sort of thing, or turn around and say, let's base it on strength.
And I'd probably watch that sport, because that'd be pretty funny. As well as being sport. I mean, Paul, the transgender athletes have an obvious advantage. They've got if you go through male puberty, you get a bigger skeleton, greater muscle density. It's easier to parallel park outside the stadium. Are you surprised to see the woke left suddenly becoming incredibly misogynist?
No, you're all a bunch of transphobes as far as I can. Do you know what? I would never have got my under-12 girls wrestling champion if I listened to any one of you three, and I'm very proud of that medal. I won easily.
But you only did it last week as well.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what?
Barely knackered from it.
If we're going to push out all the women, then OK, fine. We're going to have to at least make the medals bigger with bigger ribbons to go around the broader shoulders, and we're going to have to make the bouquets of flowers bigger for the big hands.
To answer your question, though, Leo, I often wonder, do these people have mothers or sisters or grandmothers? They just seem to chuck them up. How were they formed? Were they? I'm assuming Guardian journalists were made in some dastardly laboratory somewhere.
I believe how it's done.
Yeah, but I mean, they just seem to? Are they completely remiss of how they got here?
I've no idea, to be honest. Anyway, next up, we've got Acorns. The American police, this American police force are unsurprisingly back in the spotlight after video emerged of a pretty extraordinary incident. Police officers in Florida opened fire on an SUV after they mistook an acorn dropping on the roof of their car as gunfire. Take a look.
Shots fired! You know. I'm hit!
So two police officers basically emptied entire clips of this poor guy who'd done nothing. It was an acorn that fell. You can see in one of the videos, you can actually see the acorn
coming down.
bouncing off the...
I got a picture of it. It's fantastic. It's got its own little account now. It's wonderful.
Oh my God.
But the reality is this.
It's now the most wanted acorn in the Los Angeles
area. It's there. Work on that principle. Yes, out of tiny acorns, woke trees grow. You've got to work on that sort of basis. It's a bit worrying, though, isn't it? They're so trigger happy on this sort of thing. This is the concern, is they're so highly charged when they go to these events. The slightest thing that they
were triggered by autumn.
Worse.
Luckily, there are some funny memes coming out of it. Here's the Office meme where corporate wants you to tell the difference between this picture and this picture. It's a gun and an acorn. It's the same picture. That one wasn't that funny, but there are funny memes. Here's one, the acorn falling on a car. Again, it's not actually that funny, but you can see the thought that's gone into it.
I mean, to be fair... Oh, sorry.
No. Well, these are better. Look, this is a funny one.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. That'll work as a funny line.
That's the police showing a table of acorns that they've seized. Paul, I mean, do you think this could have been a mischievous squirrel?
Well, imagine if it was. That would be absolutely brilliant if it was. They seem to have been triggered by autumn in some way, which is ridiculous. I hadn't seen the video. So if it wasn't so dangerous, there was actually a man in front of those guns being shot at. Yeah. If it hadn't been for that, that would have been one of the funniest things I've seen all week. And I've been at 4 comedy gigs this week. The man, he was lying, got shots fired.
Yeah.
How tense is that guy in his job that an acorn falls on his car and he just starts unloading all the lead he's got into the nearest person?
And somebody else sees that, an officer has come under fire and starts emptying their clip as well.
I think, to be fair, we've all been in the car when, like, a twig or something has landed on the car, and it does make you jump a little bit. Yeah. But if I had a gun, maybe I would be shot because I wouldn't be that quick. I'd be like, OK, where did that come from? I'd at least try and find who was shooting at me first. But he just sort of peppers the neighbourhood.
But I have heard a gunshot. I've been in London, and they don't sound anything like acorns dropping on car roofs. I mean, it is a surprise, it is a shock, but it doesn't sound like a gunshot.
The trouble is that sense of readiness, and this is the problem, and it is a very serious problem. You're lucky nobody did die, because the reality is, if you go bang behind somebody, their fingers on the trigger, they're going to do it.
I did that once to my husband. He was changing... No, he was changing a light bulb, and I snuck up behind him with a party popper, and I pulled it, and it was great. But he was very angry.
You're lucky we don't have open carry laws.
There you go.
And you could have been shot. Your husband could be at the top of the step ladder.
And the decree nice just come through, is that right? You work on that basis.
Anyway, next up, it's our old friend. It's Argentina's president, Javier Milei.
Oh, I love him.
How they laughed at him for taking advice from cloned versions of his dead dogs. How they laughed when he appeared at press conferences with a chainsaw. But Javier has been proven absolutely correct. He ran for election, promising to reduce the size of the state by slashing bureaucracy, eliminating government publicity campaigns, and reducing subsidies. But January was his first month in full power, and lo and behold, Argentina had its first budget surplus in 12 years. They're over $500 million in the black. I mean, Paul, these are great numbers. Should we, in this country, also slash our bloated public sector and run around with chainsaws?
I suggest we should. I mean, unless economic wealth, or health, should I say, is now racist, this can only be seen as a very good thing. And it's a stark reminder that there's been 12 years of socialism in Argentina, and with no surplus in that time. It's like Birmingham Council, but they're running an entire country.
Yeah, it literally is like
the idea that he's just been able to go in there as an economist himself and go, get rid of that, 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 and all of a sudden he's saved a load of money and the country's still operating fine, makes you wonder what on earth the previous administration were thinking about.
Well, it's what all administrations in the West seem to be thinking as well. I mean, the share of GDP spent by the state is just gradually ratcheting up in every country. We're just slowly, like a frog being boiled, slowly sleepwalking into communism.
You're right. Like a frog being boiled is the analogy he was going to use. And what I love about him, he's got the. If you want to get ahead, get a great head of hair.
Yeah.
We always love him. He's our poster boy for this. But the reality is, if you don't spend the money, you're going to have more of it. So I don't know what the shocking story is. I haven't spent it. I've got more. Hurrah! Let's do that. So you work on that principle. But you're right. If it still continues, and that's a big if it still continues to operate in the right way, it means money was being wasted. So all credit to him. Don't write him off. Look at that sort of basis. If it's not, and things are collapsing because he's not spending money on it, then it raises different questions.
And let's just watch the video, the famous video of him saying how he's going to slash the public sector.
Turismo y deporte, afuera. Ministerio de Cultura, afuera. Ministerio de Ambiente y Desarrollo Sostenible, afuera. Ministerio de las Mujeres y Género y Diversidad, afuera. Ministerio de Obras Públicas, afuera.
Paul just asked if he ran Pimlico Plumbers, but I think he was actually the drummer in Oasis.
He was.
But Dan, Liz Truss said she was going to slash the woke blob, the civil service. And then the woke blob, the civil service and the system, the deep state, in her words, got rid of her. Do you think we should have given her a chance to slash the public sector?
No, because Liz Truss kind of did it the wrong way round.
Yeah,
she really did. And also, like, what she and Kwasi Kwarteng did was just such a massive implosion in our economy. It really wasn't good.
So they announced the tax cuts before announcing the public spending cuts, which obviously spooked investors in Britain.
They did it completely the wrong way round.
With the key people. That's the lesson, isn't it?
Yeah.
Discuss it with everybody. Because it's actually a great idea. If you look at it, make sure everybody's on board.
Yeah.
But you need to look at these things not in isolation. It's like any part of the equation.
Yeah.
Don't look at one side of the seesaw without the other. Don't spend money you got more.
Discuss it with the civil service. They'll tell you not to do it, and then you do it anyway.
Exactly. That's okay. We love dictatorships like that.
What's great?
Sorry.
Yes, Margaret Thatcher. Never be sorry.
Margaret Thatcher, God bless her. She took 7 years to get her union reforms in.
Yes.
7 years, from 79 to 86. She wanted to do that in 79, but she knew very wisely, and she didn't. She built her cabinet around people that didn't necessarily support her as well. And the difference with her and Liz Truss is Liz Truss's cabinet was just her mates.
Yes.
Right.
Going back to Millet, what I do like is that he went to Davos and he basically said to everybody at Davos, look, you need to stop this socialism because you are actually restricting people's freedoms by not allowing them to be capitalists and not allowing them to generally have freedom and make money.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that he said that to Davos.
He's a great man. And he flew there on a commercial jet instead of flying there on a private jet. Yes. Anyway, next on the Saturday Night Showdown, why have we allowed threats from Islamists to completely derail our parliamentary system? Plus, on a slightly lighter note, who would win in a fight between a man and a tree? Take a look at this.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Multicultural Corner coming up. But first, I promised I would show you what happens when you karate kick a tree.
Yeah.
Paul, you've been seen fighting with shrubbery after a few drinks.
Shrubbery?
What did this guy do wrong?
When the old gammon's been out on the side, I'm often there, you know, fighting trees. But he was dressed as the tree as well, wasn't he?
That's how he got so close.
It's a wonderful, yes, exactly. So it didn't run off.
Look at him. It's a sort of, what was he trying to do there? Who was he trying to impress? Who was that
camera person.
Had he won?
I was very impressed.
What are you talking about?
Had he won that fight?
Yes.
You can't chalk it down as a success, can you? It's a dead tree.
Most of the trees have already gone on. It's like, but do you think he's going to go on and then fight, you know, a giant redwood or something?
Well, good luck to him.
Yeah, yeah, good luck to him. Well, it's been another tumultuous week in British politics as Parliament descended into complete chaos. MPs walked out of the chamber on Wednesday evening in protest over amendments tabled to a vote on a ceasefire in Gaza. It's the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who's facing the most backlash. He's been accused of bowing to pressure from the Labour Party to bring their specific amendments to the vote. Many Labour Party MPs have received death threats, graffiti and intimidation, with one MP told that his wife would be shown what a real man is. MP Mike Freer stood down after threats. The Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has said he was just responding out of concern for the safety of those MPs. Now, I'm not sure that we should be subverting democracy to appease threats from Islamists, but when Hoyle was questioned on Sky about the threats faced by MPs, different groups were foremost in his mind. Let's have a look at what he said.
You can't divorce anti-Semitism from the threats and attacks he's faced. Do you agree with that framing? Is that the key risk and cause at the moment?
We've lots of risk and we've lots of people who don't, whether it's people who are white fundamentalists, the people there, the rise of the extreme right, to terrorists coming across. We face many threats.
Now, I have to clarify that this interview took place before this week, but it's in the same context. I mean, are you worried about the threat to British democracy? And are you surprised that, Dan, that, you know, despite the obvious rise of Islamism in the UK, people are still saying, oh, no, the real problem is far-right extremists. I mean, I can't remember the last time a far-right extremist, you know, committed a terrorist atrocity or threatened MPs.
No, and there's, I mean, OK, so there's a lot here. So with Lindsay Hoyle sort of denying the amendments to the whole of the SNP, I'm not surprised people walked out. Yeah. And the apology that Lindsay Hoyle gave, I was not impressed with at all. I mean, 10 out of 10 babes for emotion, but 1 out of 10 for the words. I heard the words, and she is clearly not completely committed. When you say things like, oh, I own up to my mistakes, oh, there's a saucer of milk already coming in there. You know, you could start to tell it's a bit of a manipulative apology. If my mistake was caring so much, Lindsay Hoyle, why didn't you just say, I'm sorry you feel that way? Yeah. Because that's how it came across.
Exactly. So it totally is just stop Hoyle, isn't it? You work like, I see what I did there.
How long have you been waiting for that?
Forever. I just love the story.
I'm worried that he's basically admitted, yes, we folded.
Yes.
We folded. I did this because we were being intimidated by Islamic extremists, which is basically saying to the Islamic extremists, you won. Do more of it.
And that's
works.
absolutely the point. And so let's look at this, because actually the reality is it's totally party political.
Yeah.
The reason it was introduced was to show the division in the Labour Party. That was the whole point of the SNP thing. So Labour wanted to stop that so people couldn't shine a spotlight on their division. If you bear that in mind, then the rest of it folds into insignificance.
Right.
And the whole thing about Sir Lindsay, and I think he's a great speaker. I like him as a man, and I think he does a great job generally. He was wrong on this.
Yeah.
The bit about, if I'm guilty of caring too much, I thought, we don't get that at all. But the reality is it was a party political thing, and that's the issue.
But going back to then Leo's second point about the rise of the Islamist fundamentalists,
yes.
I think, like, I consider myself on the left, although many people apparently don't because I'm sat here. But...
left of Leo.
Yeah,
left of me. Far left of me.
But you have to be realistic, because there is an increasing presence of people in the UK who want Sharia law. And I'm like, stop, because if you can't acknowledge that, and if you say, oh, no, we can't talk about that, so that's racist, you are going to sleepwalk into a situation where suddenly there's going to be a lot of oppression happening. And if that does happen, I'm one of the first groups that goes down.
And it's very simple. It's parliamentary procedure. He got it wrong. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And his job is to enforce parliamentary procedure. He's right to be scared. I think it's appalling that MPs are threatened. We've had already murders and things like that. Mike Freer, when you talk about him and his concern for his family, all of that's appalling.
Yeah.
The parliamentary procedure, however, is in place because of democracy, and that was upset this week.
And I think it's pathetic for people to still be deflecting and saying, oh, but white supremacy, far-right extremists. I mean, I've never actually seen one. Anyway, next on the Saturday Night Showdown, it's time for Clown World. This week, Cristiano Ronaldo's girlfriend's butt, and the UK university which does not know the difference between twins and meatballs. Plus, I'll show you what happened when this guy dropped his phone whilst trying to film an alligator.
Maybe if the gator left, I would get it. But even then...
Maybe, like, there's, like, the walking stick.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News.
Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Clown World is coming up, but first I promised I would show you what happens when you drop your phone in front of an alligator.
Pink stick isn't long enough.
Oh, he's gonna eat it.
No, it's not.
Oh my god.
For anyone listening on radio, that was an alligator eating someone's phone, just in case anybody thought that was somebody had reached down to grab the phone and that was their arm. Would you be able to resist phoning that phone to hear the alligator's belly?
Oh my God, but imagine what kind of ringtone you might have. And suddenly you've got this alligator swimming along with like...
The Jaws ringtone, so the next victim it goes up to is...
I love it. And the alligator taking the snap, so it's got to be good on the phone.
Lovely work, Andrew.
We're nearing the end of the show and it's time to have some fun. Let's see what Iranian photoshoppers at Iran's biggest newspaper have been up to this week. And let's play a game of Spot the Difference. Here's picture one of footballing icon Cristiano Ronaldo and his family. They seem to be having a splendid time celebrating his 39th birthday. And here's picture two. Iran's state newspaper, that's part of the Iranian regime, got hold of the photo. You can see they photoshopped her butt off rather inelegantly. Apparently, you can't show plump buttocks in Iran because it'll inflame people's passions. It's the same idea behind, covering.
Yeah, this is why I've never worked in Iran. My agent keeps saying, I'm trying to get you the Iran work, but you've got the plump buttocks, mate.
Yes, no ifs or buts is what they say, and you work on that basis. It's coming to... No, but you're right, about sensibilities, they cover things up and so on and so forth, and it's the same. If you've got any extreme things, they'll reduce it.
But it's not extreme. Yeah, that was just her bum, and the worst part is they didn't even Photoshop it in a nice way.
It was like a hack thing. It was like the alligator got her, wasn't it?
Yeah. That woman's got a beautiful figure.
Yes.
She's got a beautiful figure, and they just lopped it off.
Yeah.
I mean, no, he should do something. He should sue Iran.
Don't spend any money there. And how about this appalling mix-up? Another organisation has had a terrible week. The University of Birmingham has been branded as ignorant this week after the organisation got into a spot of bother in distinguishing Sikhism from Islam. In a now deleted Instagram post, the university claimed that a langar, a community meal organised by Sikh students, was actually an event in the lineup for their Discover Islam week. Andrew, I have to enjoy that. I admit seeing people striving to signal their virtue signalling their diversity, knowledge of diversity and stuff, and getting it wrong.
Yeah, we're so quick to take offence, though. I have to say, it's ignorance, but it's not a malicious ignorance. It's not sort of turning around trying to be deliberately difficult.
Were you expecting the University of Birmingham to organise a pogrom?
Well, you could... exactly. But it's wrong, isn't it? Just to say they didn't know what the community meal is. Yeah. So you tell them once, and if they get it wrong again, you might be a bit more upset. But just to say, oh, you didn't know about this community meal, this is what it's called, and I think it's wrong. It's overstepped the mark. We're too quick to take offence.
Do you agree with Andrew? Do you think...
you have to agree, or you can be wrong.
I like it when if it's woke, people are all like, oh, look, I love diversity, I'm such a good person, I push it and all the rest of it. And then they get it completely wrong and fall on their faces. That's what I love to...
Well, it's yummy, isn't it?
Yeah.
You absolutely know that because they work for a university, they're going to be woke. I mean, that's part of the interview process now, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of comedy gigs have actually been shut down in universities, and why some comedians aren't allowed to perform there, because they've got very strict virtue signalling, and you get that list of things saying, please don't mention any of these things to the students.
You have to sign a behaviour agreement form before you perform at some universities.
In some places,
I've got in trouble performing at universities.
I know you have.
Wasn't even invited before.
Yeah, he was in there, yeah.
Walked into the woke studies
just
class.
drunk and turning up naked wasn't the best plan. Anyway, right, up next, it's Mark Dolan tonight. What have you got for us this evening, Mark?
Well, Leo, a really busy show. We've got Mark Meets. I'll be speaking to the scriptwriter of The Two Ronnies. We've got My Big Opinion. And in my Take at 10, Prince William has effectively called for a ceasefire in Gaza. Let me be honest with you, he should stick to opening hospital wings and kissing babies.
That sounds absolutely fantastic, Mark. I look forward to watching it. And also, if you're watching tonight, stay tuned for Headliners later on at 11 p.m. We've got a new panellist on that, Adam Kumis. Can't wait to see him. And thanks to my brilliant panel tonight, Diane Spencer, Paul Cox and Andrew Eborn. See you again next week. Bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Greg Dewhurst. We'll see some frost and fog forming through tonight, but we do have some heavy rain moving into southern parts of England and Wales as we go through Sunday and into Monday, courtesy of this area of low pressure. Met Office warnings already out for this part of the world through